very, thank you very much, Rob. Thank you so much, Rob, and I'm going to pass you this. And Ilaria, would you like to introduce our new panelist? So I just want to also welcome Daniele Jallà, who's joined us from Ecom. And what we're going to do now is just really give some responses to Rob's presentation, perhaps ask some questions. And I think we'll try to wrap up promptly at 12 o'clock so that we can go ahead and hear Cory Doctorow give his keynote and still break in time for lunch, which I think is very important. I wanted to start off actually just, Rob, by first of all thanking you for doing that beautiful job, and it was such a nice segue from Laura Longo's introduction of connecting kind of the state of technology today and uses of it and the evolutionary process of it with a past, with a history. As I said, I think that the last time I got to speak here, I was actually trained as a classicist, Roman archaeology, and thoroughly convinced that there's very little that's new under the sun. So thank you for kind of making that point. My question to you, though, is I think one of the concerns about the current trend in the developments of pervasive computing and pervasive technology is a fear of massification, of globalization. The concern that indeed Clay Shirky was quite right when he quoted Philip Anderson that, more is different, that things happen at scale that fundamentally change the system. And I'm just interested to hear what you think of as kind of the impact of scale on what we're seeing today. And are you seeing at the same time as this kind of massification, globalization, also some new opportunities for niche communities, niche interests, niche activities to emerge? And I ask this because I've always been struck by how museums seem to be very good at niche. Our collections tend to be created by subject matter experts and niche subjects. Our collections are representative of this niche expertise. And are there some new opportunities for us to, in a sense, focus in on the bobbies and serve them more directly at the same time as we're hopefully serving more people better? And I'll give you one of these.
Thank you. I think, thank you. So it's a very good question. It's certain that scale is an issue. I think one of the things that we need to continue to be mindful of is that technology itself is never smart. People can be smart, and technology can be great tools, but in fact, in and of itself, it's not smart. But your comment about niche is really interesting, and it's a topic that I hadn't expected to happen as a part of our DMA Friends program, but in fact, it is about scale. It's about taking a relationship with the public to as large of a scale as possible, and we will see in a very short time that there will be hundreds of thousands of people participating and tens of millions of rows of data about them. But in fact, what's really interesting is that the insights that are coming out are at the level of an individual. And in fact, we're seeing that the most valuable part of having a very large data set is the ability to discover small micro communities inside of the larger community. And I think one of the things that many museums are getting lost in right now is in marketing to or designing to or educating for the audience as a faceless mass, a very abstract concept of an audience, and forgetting or getting away from the idea that every audience is made up of people who are very different than each other, all of whom are coming with preconceptions and relationships with them. And so it's a little counterintuitive, but when your data is large enough, you actually can gain insights about the individual that you wouldn't have had at your disposal before, at least not very easily. So.
I have a question also. It's about artificial intelligence, because I think that the future is profiling and the Internet of Things that give the possibility to teach machines about our needs, our interests, and so we can get from these guides that we have inside of museums and outside in cities, we can have real companion that can know that what we want, what we are interested in, and in some way this is scary because it can kill in some way our freedom to get surprised, to get in a place and to find a shop or to see an exhibit while touring a city. But I'm asking myself, and I ask you, what about the artificial intelligence? Do you think it will help thanks to the smart cities? Because that will be possible only thanks to a very great working well infrastructure that can give us the possibility to stay in touch and give this information and have this exchanging of data.
So I think that artificial learning and artificial intelligence and or data mining can be really good at telling us things that we've already taught it. So if I can describe a problem completely, then the computer can answer that same problem for me again in the future. But the computer can never make meaning of its own from no matter how big the data is. It needs a person and needs a designer to essentially curate that information for you as a person. So I think that while computers will get better and the breadth of questions for which they can answer will inevitably get larger, they'll only get larger in response to design. So I think the ways in which they'll be able to serve us will only be as good as the designers.
You don't think we can reach the Mary Shelley Frankenstein level? I hope no.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of discussion about Kurzweil's singularity these days, but I think even Kurzweil says it's a long way off.
Rob, I'd be interested to know whether or not you have got plans to take your museum outside its own walls with smart city concepts. Sorry, it's not coming through.
So the question was whether or not, thank you for the question, it was whether or not we had plans to take our museum outside of its own walls. And we had, we've treated the whole project, and in fact our approach to the museum as a very iterative process where we've tried to make it very small to start. But in fact the vision was not so much to incentivize the museum's own sense of cultural heritage, but to inspire cultural citizens in Dallas that may contribute to the city's culture as well as participate in places that may spring up all on their own. I think what we see as the future audience for museums are cultural participants. And we already know that someone who visits art galleries or participates in art making in their neighborhood or attends the symphony, we already know that those are the people who are most predisposed to be our audience. So we think that by creating more of them, no matter where they are in the city, that's probably good for us in the long term.
So I might ask, I know, Rob, you've really been one of the most important leaders in technology innovation in the museum community for many, many years now. And you and your colleagues have introduced a number of new platforms and new technologies that are now kind of common tools used by museums around the world. At the same time, I think we've seen some of those technologies maybe fall into less use, trending towards disuse. So I was wondering if you could expand upon your comment that you're approaching this iteratively, and is there any wisdom you can kind of derive from those experiences that you've had so far and to share with us on what our expectations should be when we invest in a new system, be it something like DMA Friends or Art Babel or any of the other platforms and technologies that you've worked with? What should our reasonable expectations be in terms of their lifetime, and therefore how do we calculate the return on investment?
It's a very good question. I think one of the things we know about technology is that it is always changing. And so I think some of what we're vulnerable to as museums is planning for a point in time that has passed us by the time we get there. So as we're thinking about new technology solutions or new ways to use technology, I think we ought to plan it more like a meal, where the meal is good at a particular time, and if you wait too long, well, the food gets cold. From our perspective, the best way to plan for change is to change with it. So when I say we have an iterative approach, it's that I don't necessarily know what technology will be like when I get to the end of the road, nor do I know that there is an end. So I think museums, because we have a history of planning very large publications, very large exhibitions, and we're taking care of heritage on the scale of centuries, it's hard for us to do things that are small. It seems counterintuitive, but it's easier for us to envision planning a very large effort that takes multiple years, and very hard for us to think about how to do the next best thing in the matter of weeks. So the change in approach is one where knowing what the next best thing is at this moment and how it builds or connects on all of your prior effort is really the most efficient way to be a contemporary museum. And whether that is in fact online or in the galleries or in print, the more we can continuously adapt in the moment to the conditions that we find ourselves in, I think the more useful our work will be over a longer period of time.
You remind me of words which I often quote by your colleague Ted Forbes: do what you can, do it now, do better tomorrow.
Can I ask? Yes. We have a question too. We are from Moscow, and we have many guests in our museum. And would you like to say, have you plans to take for friends not only citizens of your city? Can I visit Dallas and become your friend?
That's a great question. So have we considered having friends in other cities? Yes. So part of the idea would be, if this is a good idea and if it turns out to be useful, that a variety of these sorts of programs could happen all over the world potentially. But one of the things that we know is that when somebody who appreciates culture and museums travels to Florence or to anywhere else in the world, we're most likely to find ourselves in museums and appreciating culture. So when you visit Dallas, I hope that you would show up at my museum And when you do, if it would be a lovely experience that if you had been a very active part of your local cultural community, that if I had some way to know that and recognize you and appreciate you when you came to Dallas as an important VIP, and not because you were very wealthy, but because you were very engaged with culture, that would be a very lovely experience, and one that I think is in line with what we value.
And if I might follow on with that to ask you a question, actually, Lada, about your practices in your museum and in your museum community, which I know you're going to be demonstrating and we're going to hear more about during this conference. But are you already working in a sort of a networked way among the cultural heritage institutions, either near you or even more dispersed globally?
Yes. First of all, I want to say how happy I am to be here. I'm very glad for inviting to this. I have never been to Florence. It's wonderful. Thank you very much. I want to say that unfortunately I don't know language very well, so I ask you forgive me, and I placed my friend, my colleague Marina, and she told about us and about our experience. Well, thank you.
I will try to help my friend, my colleague to translate.
У нас сейчас совсем новая экспозиция, в которой, вот представьте себе, в Москве есть музеи, в которых не так давно, всего 2 года назад, появились новые технологии, и один из таких больших музеев.
Our exposition is very new. It was updated only 2 years ago, and now we have one of the most advanced, technologically advanced museum in Moscow, our museum.
После того, как мы сделали экспозицию, после того, как к нам стали приходить люди, мы поняли, что нужно делать следующий шаг. Этот шаг должен быть шаг за стены музея. То есть
After our exposition was finished, we realized that we should go outside the walls of our museum. We should attract more people outside of our museum.
В основном к нам ходят дети, школьники, и мы хотим, чтобы они лучше понимали то, о чем мы пытаемся рассказать внутри, а главное, мы хотим, чтобы люди в Москве лучше понимали эту нашу очень сложную тему.
Our basic audience is school children and family audience, but we would like them to be more engaged in the problem of, not problem, in the theme of our museum and our topic. Какая наша тема?
Война 1812 года, Наполеоновские войны.
Our museum tells about the Napoleonic War. We are Museum Panorama, the Battle of Borodino, and we tells about the most significant events in our history, Napoleon invasion in Russia.
Приходится говорить не столько об искусстве, сколько об истории, а это уже очень далеко и совсем непонятно, и поэтому...
We have to talk about, not only about art, but mostly about history, and it is not so easy now.
И поэтому мы пытаемся рассказывать наши истории от лица конкретных людей и очень интересным языком, storytelling.
That's why we are trying to tell our history from a particular person. It is a storytelling, interesting way of storytelling.
И мы поняли в какой-то момент, что самым лучшим способом для этого являются мобильные устройства, которые есть у каждого человека, и получается, что человек из прошлого рассказывает историю человеку сегодняшнему.
And at the moment we realized that the best way for storytelling is using mobile applications, which are very wide now, which are widespread at this moment.
И еще это позволяет нам создавать контекст, это позволяет нам находить очень короткие пути к людям.
It allows us to find the shortest way for people. to people, to our audience.
Для разных людей разные пути, разные
For
приложения.
different people, different ways, different methods of working.
Информацию для детей рассказываем одним способом, для взрослых другим.
For the children audience, we use one way of talking. For the adult audience, we use another way of talking and storytelling.
Такое количество контента возможно стало только благодаря наличию бесплатной платформы для мобильных приложений, которой мы теперь пользуемся.
For such a huge content, it was possible to realize such a huge content only due to a free and open mobile platform.
И теперь, выйдя за стены музея, мы сумели объединить сразу большое количество музеев, не только даже в Москве, но и в России, которые пользуются этой платформой, обмениваются контентом и буквально окружают людей нашей историей.
And now we managed to combine a lot of people, not only in Moscow, but also in another Russian cities who use our content, our mobile applications, and who can join us and to become our visitors in some way.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this makes me think, I was just wondering if Giovanna would like to add anything to that.
Some question I'd like to I have some question. I try to give an answer from my point of view, and after I'd like to know if Rob Stein agree or doesn't agree. Because I am Giovanna Barni, I am the president of CoopCulture. CoopCulture is a cooperative that work in the cultural heritage branch in Italy for over 20 years. And we manage over 100 museums and artistic venues in the whole country, such as the Coliseum in Rome and Palazzo Ducale in Venice, welcoming more than 10 million visitors each year. So we have a long and rich experience, and during this experience, we have lived through successful and less successful attempts to introduce innovative technology in our activity. In general, we have learned that the technological innovation cannot work when it comes from another context and doesn't come with a matching reorganization of the general services inside the museum and as well as in the global city experience. And this is true for both the services we cover. On one hand, the logistics services like ticketing, membership, access systems, and on the other hand, the communication solution designed to convey the contents to the visitor. So if we consider two examples, for example, in access system, we see that, for example, the integrated ticket cards work only if linked to a broader project that keeps in mind the more complex needs of the visitors, not only saving money, but also the need of information, transportation, skipping queues, and a clear welcoming access. This explains the case of a platform we built named Campania Art Card. Is a global integrated ticket for all the region, and it is a result of a complex reorganization of local services in order to create a cultural and touristic integrated system. So I think that smart museums needs also smart city and smart region. In a similar way, in my opinion, introducing multimedia tools in a museum to support the visitor comprehension has not always been winning. For example, the interactive kiosk don't significantly help the visitor experience as they are passive and isolated from the museum paths, whereas video guides allow visitors to craft their own exploration adventure. In fact, in our experience, 1 out of 10 visitors choose to rent an audio video guide. And so the question, what did this experience teach us? What emerged, in my opinion, and I'd like to know your opinion, is that technology is useful only if the user is placed in a central role and is not passive. It meets multiple needs that the visitor may encounter during his trip, not the need of information, but the access, the transportation, the enhance his experience. It is integrated within a system that includes services both inside and outside the museum. So I think also that mobile devices is a really very opportunity to do in this direction, because firstly, research has evidence that the mobile surface profile coincides with that of the typical person interested in art and culture. Secondly, the smartphone is a tool that responds to a very variety of fundamental functions by conveying information, by giving direction. It can help you plan your itinerary, providing your e-tickets, enhance your experience, share your experience. So the smartphone is a very personal computer, and we can build our experience with a mobile device. The second question is that mobile devices alone are not enough, because like a smart museum needs a smart city, the mobile device in Italy there are a very delay in integrating arts, city, transportation, museum entrance. So, for example, in Italy it can happen that a user has downloaded an application of his smartphone to have an avatar for a virtual guided tour, but he then realizes there is no Wi-Fi. He then sees that this app has a very useful smart ticketing function and regains enthusiasm until he reaches a place and sees that only a part of the museum is open every day. So, what to do? I think that in technology and innovation, I'd like Dallas, but I think that in technology and innovation, the road to success is always under construction. We have to consider the following. All available technologies should be integrated and talk together, exchanging information. Museums need to be organized to have a network of information easily available and shareable by all technology partners. The technology partner cannot work in an isolated way. Synergy is necessary to create a product that must not only be attractive but efficient and aligned with the market's needs. So we are working in this direction, and tomorrow morning we show you some solution, but I'd like to know what do you think about this. Thank you.
And you know, unfortunately, I think the question took quite a long time, and it might be best to give our panelists time, perhaps over the lunch hour, to think about it and respond. Also, because I don't want to shortchange our keynote speaker, Cory Doctorow, who'll be speaking in just a few minutes. But I think we had. Do you want to? We have one final question for Dr. Jallà. Yeah.
We just wanted to know, we invited Daniele Jallà because they had an experience in Torino about the storytelling in the city, and we would love to know in 2 minutes.
And maybe I can, se posso espandere questa domanda un po' per includere anche la Claire Sessom. I just want to expand the question a little bit, because I think one of the reasons why we asked Claire Sessom from the Museum of London and also Daniele Jallà from the city of Torino is both have worked in terms of storytelling and mobile in the larger city. So maybe just a very quick summary of kind of your experiences, le vostre esperienze in risposta a quello che si è sentito oggi.
Yes, very quickly. I try to speak in English, asking your help when the words are not in my mind. I can put the question in this manner. What happens when you have a museum of the city and you conceive this museum as the city itself? This was the purpose of Museo Torino, to have a museum, to have the city's collection. I think the problems of management, this kind of living collection, is not very different from a museum experience. You have the same problems of identification objects. They are the places, monuments, streets, squares, gardens. How to identify in the city? Because when you have a little number of monuments, you can put a target, put a label. When the city is, all the city is the collection. You cannot put in all the city your marks. And this is the first problem. The second problem, I think, is to wayfinding. How to find your strada, your way to reach the object, and this is two problems, not very difficult to have a solution. But when you want to communicate and interpreter and storytelling about a monument as Palazzo Vecchio, how you can use not humans means, the tongue, the brain, the hands, to communicate, to tell a story about many stories present in this kind of monuments. The technology can help in this moment. I think in the future the technologies are able to help us. But in this moment, you cannot read. I'm old. I don't see nothing when I look to my telephone. The images are very little. I cannot display the beauty of a monument, the particular, etc. The tablet is not so easy to have a tablet in the city work. The whole system of a map, a guide, is in this moment the best solution. How to transform this traditional means in new means? This is a question. We have not solution. We tried very many solutions, but I continue in the museum too to think the best interpretation is a human interpretation. This is the question. Avevo promesso di parlare in italiano, ma mi è venuto spero che si capisse.
Grazie. Maybe, Claire, would you be interested in responding in terms of how the Museum of London has answered some of these challenges or responded to some of the challenges that Professor Jallà spoke of?
Yeah, that's we've been experimenting with using smartphone apps actually that enable people to see our collection in the context of the city itself. The first one was called Street Museum, and we selected a number of items from our paintings, prints and drawings collection that you could use augmented reality to see in the location itself. So for example, you can see a suffragette being arrested outside Buckingham Palace, an early image from the 20th century, by standing in that location and superimposing it on the venue. We then did a second app which was based on Roman London and added contextual augmented video and soundscapes to that. But I think when we started them, we didn't want to take people on a journey. We wanted them to select that journey for themselves. So they're given a map, but it's up to them what they go and see and how they kind of put the tour together, if you like. I think we've got more work to do in looking at what people are actually doing with these things on the ground. We've got anecdotal evidence and we've got some user evaluation, but we need to know more about how when they're given these options, what they're doing with them, how long they keep the app, for example, what they do, what they do when we release new content.
Museums of London's Street Museum app was one of the first and an incredibly exciting application of augmented reality. Again, just going back to the question that Mr. Jallà posed, are you thinking about possibly transposing it onto, say, Google Glass, which Neil Stimler will be demonstrating for us later on in the conference? Or do you see other sorts of platforms other than the smartphone, which we recognize has its certain limitations as future vehicles for those kinds of immersive experiences?
For the moment, we're just releasing new content into Street Museum right now, but I'm very interested to get a demonstration from Neil so that I can take that home and maybe suggest that as a sort of future for us.
So, Dottore Jallà, Google Glass, is that in the future of the city of Torino?
I don't know exactly because the situation, I'm not, I am retired now. I'm former.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. It's very good to be a retired man. I think the new perspective will come perhaps when the system of Wi-Fi, for example, can create a new kind of ambience in which you have many systems to have an access to information. Because the problem is you cannot select before the information. You must have when the public, the visitor, asks something to an object. When you are a person, you can answer. This is technology problems. And how to pose in the space, in the web space, a lot of information and to give the possibility to choose. When you read a book, you can choose what is interesting for you. When you have an audio guide or old technological system, you are come si può dire, obbligato, obliged. The space of interpretation, of cultural mediation is very, very closed. About this perspective, I think the problems of communication in museums and outside are the same. More complex outside, because the reality is very much different. I don't know if it's clear.
Rob, do you want to have some closing thoughts and perhaps also respond to some of the earlier questions and comments?
Sure. I think thank you for telling us a little bit about Torino, and thank you for sharing with us about your projects. I think a couple of things that have been said stood out to me. One of which was the ability to think about putting the user at the center of the design of technology. And in fact, it's correct to say that there are so many different possibilities, from the mundane of purchasing a ticket to the more inspirational and being told stories as you walk through the city. I think that sounds very fun to me. The thing that I don't think museums are doing very well right now is clearly identifying what we are trying to accomplish by using technology in a particular way and how we would know that it happened. So unless we can say what we hope to achieve, then it's very difficult to know whether or not we're heading in the right direction, and whether if we're not able to identify discreetly when that goal is being accomplished, then it's difficult to know that whether an effort on our right hand or an effort on our left hand is being more successful. So in terms of planning, how will we get where we want to be in 10 years from now? We need to do a better job today of defining what that is. So we can do a very good job of telling stories, and the stories will last a lot longer than the technology lasts. But we yet don't have a very good way to identify when the story has an impact on a person. So I think I would challenge all of us to really think more clearly about how we will know whether our museum is having that impact on individuals, and then see whether or not technology helps or hinders it. Because I think we've talked a lot about how technology can help, but I also believe that if we use it incorrectly, technology can hinder, and maybe a map really is the best way. And in that sense, we would spend a lot less money.